Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our Career Connect Spotlight event featuring our wonderful friends and partners at Polar Bears International. And welcome to all of the schools across the country and the world joining us, and clearly our friends in Craven County in North Carolina. We're so glad you all are joining us today. While we wait, hi, friends, how are you doing today? So glad you're here. While we wait for students from across the country to join us and give people an opportunity to join, we're going to use a 6-word story, which is a spotlight on strategy that we have at Discovery Education. So in your classrooms, and including our friends over there at Craven County, you're going to use this image that is pictured on the screen, and you are going to come up with a 6 summary that you think describes what is happening in that image. I'm going to give you a moment to discuss with your class. And friends in Craven County, we'd love for you to share your what you think your answer is to your 6-word story. So again, you're going to choose 6 words that summarize what you think is pictured in this image. So friends at Craven County, we're going to ask you to share in just one moment, but we're going to give our friends from across the country viewing us live a moment to think about what they think this is an image of. Giving our friends at Craven County, when you all are ready and you want to share what you think, share your 6-word story, please come up. Okay, there we go. Why don't you all share what you think?
Polar bear playing in the ice.
Okay, polar bear playing in the ice. No, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
A polar bear jumping over the ice. Seawater.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Both of you. Congratulations. That is hunting on the ice and is moving through the ice. And so we get to learn about that a little bit more today. We just want to welcome you to this Career Connect Spotlight event featuring our incredible friends from Polar Bears International. We're excited to host a spotlight event with our fantastic guest, Tyler Ross, who is a PhD candidate in research at Polar Bears International. We are also joined, like I said earlier, by our friends in Craven County, some middle school students, and of course, you all from across the country and the world joining us today. I'm going to share more about all of our guests joining us today. But before I do, let me tell us about this new series that you are joining us for, which is called a Discovery Education Career Connect Spotlight. So Career Connect Spotlight is a virtual series that allows multiple classrooms, not just our friends in Craven County, multiple classrooms just like yours from across the country to join in live and hear from subject matter experts in a huge range of career fields like our scientists at Polar Bears International that you have and will meet today. This series is brought to you by Discovery Education's new exciting platform called Career Connect, which connects classrooms like yourself to industries, people like the scientists that you are meeting today that power and impact the world around us. The goal of Career Connect is to make it easier for students like yourselves to connect with all kinds of professionals to discover real connections that you're already learning about in the classroom. And we hope these connections you to dream big and consider what you might want to be when you grow up. And my name is Kimberly Wright, and I'm your host today. I'm a former science teacher, but now I work at Discovery Education as an instructional design manager. And all that means is that when you log on to Discovery Education, experience that content that you're creating, that you're looking at, that is created by me and my team. And I'm just really thrilled to be your Career Connect Spotlight host today. And like I said, joining us today is also Tyler Ross, and I'm going to go ahead and formally introduce him. And he is, like I said, a PhD candidate in research. Tyler's work is a combination of novel and conventional tracking devices that they use to remotely monitor polar bears to determine how their movements, behaviors, and habitat selection may be changing in response to the environmental conditions around them. And so we're really thrilled to have him be joining us live from the tundra as our Career Connect Spotlight guest. So thank you and welcome, Tyler. We're so glad you're here.
Oh, thanks, Kim.
We also, you're so welcome. We're so glad. We're so excited to see the tundra live behind you. Wish I was with you. And we're also joined by some incredible middle school students joining us from Craven County in North Carolina. We understand that you all are really excited to learn more about what Tyler and his team are doing at Polar Bears International, and we can't wait to hear your curiosity questions today. Awesome. So glad to have everybody. And I have to say, we are joining you from multiple time zones from across North America right now. So this is truly a fun and cool event that we have here. So before we get to your questions, our friends at Craven County, what we want to do is use a discovery education spotlight on strategy called Half the Story to have Tyler kind of introduce what it is that he does every day. We're going to use this strategy to kind of determine and introduce what it is that Tyler does every day. So with your class, you're going to look at this portion of an image. So this portion is actually part of a larger image. So with your classmate or partner in our virtual class and there in Craven County, what I want you to do is look at this image and kind of think about, what do you think this is image of? Take a moment, consider what your answer is. And those of you viewing in your classroom, you can share with us via social media, or you can just choose to share within your own classroom. And friends there in Craven County, we're going to ask you all to share what you think your answer is. And really this is an image of a part of a larger image that really represents the research and the work that Tyler is doing. I'm going to go ahead and give you a moment to talk to your classmates. Think about what it is that that is a picture of and how that connects to the work Tyler's currently doing. Go ahead and share.
I think that it might be like a piece to like track down where they might be to study them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. We appreciate it. Tyler, why don't we show them that larger image? Oh, wait, we have somebody else who's going to share as well. I apologize. Do you want to share? Go ahead and share. I'm so sorry.
I think it's something they put in the polar bear's fur to like see what they're doing in their daily life.
Do I have anyone else who would like to share? Great. Okay, you're like, nope, those are our two guesses. Okay, great. So Tyler, why don't we show them the larger image, and why don't you tell them if they guessed correctly?
Absolutely. So you guessed it perfectly. That's exactly what you're looking at. That is a tracker that we put on polar bears to determine what they're doing and where they're moving throughout the year. And this is a really special tracker. This is the first time that they've ever been used on polar bears, was in 2021 and 2022. And what's so unique about them is that they attach to the bear's fur, as you can see in that photograph. Normally we use collars and other devices to track where the bears are moving, but these are the first time we use these tags to see where the bears are moving throughout the winter.
Okay, great. Tyler, do you want to share a little bit more about the work that you do every day?
Absolutely. I live in northern Canada, where I work as a wildlife biologist. And believe it or not, like all of you, I am still a student. So I'm still going to school where I'm finishing up my PhD. And that's just as graduate school where I study polar bears for a living. But over the course of my career, I've studied lots of different animals. So I've studied teeny tiny little damselflies. I've studied salamanders, ring seals, larger animals like moose and elk and deer. And now I'm studying polar bears. And so my work focuses primarily on habitat selection. And what that means is I look at where polar bears move and why they want to move there. So what are the conditions that polar bears need and want to kind of live in? And that's what my research focuses on now. So I study a population of polar bears at the southern extreme of their global range. So in southern Hudson Bay and James Bay. And again, as I said, I look at where they're moving on the sea ice, but I also look at where they are spending their time during the period of time they spend on land when the females are denning. And in addition to that, the 6-word question you answered, I've been looking at new technology to help us track polar bears. So whereas some of my research, we rely on collars or ear tags to determine where the bears are moving, this was the first time we tested out these new tags to see where the bears are going.
Thank you so much for sharing what everything that you do, obviously the work that you do, and so great to know that you're a student as well. But obviously the work that you're doing is really important and impacts the polar bears that we're going to learn more about today. And I know the work that you are doing is really going to also inspire some curiosity in our students, and we can't wait to learn from you today. So students from Craven County, I understand that you all have some questions that you would like to ask Tyler today. Are you all ready to share your curiosity questions with Tyler? Yes?
Yes,
Awesome.
we
Okay,
are.
Tyler, we're going to give them over to you to share questions.
My name is Mary, and my question is, how long do polar bears survive in the wild compared to captivity?
Great question, Mary. So polar bears, they live a pretty tough life in the wild. And so on average, they live about 15 to 18 years. But we'll often see bears that are older than that when we're working with them. So we'll frequently see bears that are in their 20s, so their mid-20s, early 20s. And the females tend to live a little bit longer than the males do, but they'll get up to the 20s and sometimes even as old as 30 in the wild. Bears in zoos, where they're getting fed every day, they have reliable food, they tend to live a little bit longer. And actually the longest bear that ever lived in captivity lived to be 42 years old. Her name was Debbie, and she lived at the Assiniboine Park Zoo in Winnipeg.
Wow.
That is
All right, you ready for our next
incredible. We are ready.
Here we go.
My name is Central, and my question is, how do you tell if a polar bear is a boy or a girl?
Great question. So it can actually be kind of difficult to determine if it's a boy or a girl, particularly from a helicopter, and that's often where we're doing our work. So we're flying and we're looking for polar bears, and when you're that high up in the air, it can be difficult to determine if it's a boy or a girl. One way that's a giveaway, of course, is if the bear has a small cub, we know for sure that that's a female. So she's got one cub or 2 cubs or 3 cubs with her, it's definitely a female. Another good way to tell males and females apart is their size. Males are generally much larger than the females of the same sort of age class. So if you have an adult male and an adult female, the female is generally about half the size of the adult male. So the size is a big difference. Another way that you can tell is the males, particularly in the spring, they like to fight with one another sometimes. And so occasionally males will have some scars or little injuries on their face or their body. And that's a pretty good indication that it's a boy polar bear. And lastly, as males get older, they tend to get really long guard hairs on their legs and kind of on their belly. And so that's a good way to tell for sure that that's an older male.
All right, next question.
Hi, my name is Catherine. My question is, how do polar bears adapt to global warming?
Great question. Yeah, so as the ice is melting in the Arctic, we've noticed some changes in the polar bear's behavior. So a few things that we've noticed over the years is bears have kind of changed their diet in response. So recently they've been eating larger proportions of things like bird eggs. There's even records of them eating reindeer in Svalbard, which is in Norway. And another thing that we've noticed is that the bears are swimming longer because that ice is melting sooner. So they're actually having to swim for longer distances and longer time. and they're spending more time on land in certain areas of the Arctic where the sea ice melts in the summer. So here in Hudson Bay, where I am today, we've seen that the bears are spending about a month longer on land than they did before. And this is, of course, a big problem because the longer that the bears are on shore, the longer they're fasting, because their primary food is ring seals and marine mammals, and that's really what they need to survive. So while they have shifted or are eating a little bit more different food from the land, like I said, bird eggs, that's not enough to sustain polar bears. So they really need to eat those seals and those big fat marine mammals to sustain themselves. So while they are changing their behaviors a little bit, it's not going to be enough if that ice continues to disappear into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Liam, and my question is, how much do polar bears eat in a day, and what do they eat?
Great question, Liam. Thank you. So polar bears, their stomach can actually hold up to about 10 to 20% of their total body weight. So that's a lot. So they can fit a lot in their stomach. And a really, really hungry bear could eat up to about 100 pounds of food in a day. But that's a lot. That would be a really, really hungry bear. And so in order for them to sustain themselves, so to get the energy that they need to survive, they need to eat about 5 pounds or a little bit more than that per day of fat. But unlike you and I, who we generally have breakfast and lunch and dinner, so 3 meals a day, polar bears don't generally eat every day. Rather, they need to eat about 1 seal per week or so, so about 7 to 8 days. And so they're not generally eating every day, but they're catching a seal, and then that will sustain them for several days. And sorry, the second part of your question is, what are they eating? Polar bears are eating marine mammals. That's their primary source of food, and specifically ring seals. And so ring seals we find across the sea ice throughout the Arctic, and that's what they eat most. But they also eat other species of seals, so bearded seal. Occasionally they'll eat harbor and harp seal, but that's a little bit less common. Some of the bigger males will even eat beluga whales occasionally, and sometimes they may stumble upon a washed-up whale, and they'll feed on that as well. So they can be opportunistic foragers also, but really their primary diet is ring seal.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our last question, and then you'll have your more questions.
My name is Ravi, and my question is, what can we do to protect polar bears from becoming extinct?
Great question, Ravi. So I think the biggest, most important thing that you can do, and what you're doing right now, is learning all about polar bears. The more we understand about polar bears, the more you come to love them, and then the more you'll come to want to kind of protect them. And so what you're doing is great, learning more and more about the species, and then going and talking to your friends about polar bears, and talking to your parents about polar bears, and explaining what's happening and what the bears need. Because right now, by far the biggest threat facing polar bears is climate change and global warming. Their habitat's disappearing. So by talking to people like our friends and our parents, as I said, we can help inform them as well, and start to make the changes necessary to help protect their habitat.
Thank you so much for all of your questions. We really appreciate all of the curiosity questions that you all shared with us today. Tyler, our viewers, they also submitted some questions for you to answer. Do you mind if I share those with you now?
Of course, yeah.
You've answered so many questions already. So, okay, so the first one is, you answered like, how is global warming impacting polar bears? But a second part to this question that someone submitted is, how is global warming and pollution impacting?
Right. So yeah, as I said before, global warming is causing their primary habitat, their sea ice, to melt much earlier, and it's freezing up a lot later as well. So that's obviously a big problem, because sea ice is absolutely critical for the species. But in terms of other forms of pollution, we do see it in bears in the Arctic, and it's unfortunate because there are very few people that live in the Arctic. So the people that live here generally are contributing virtually nothing in terms of pollution. But a lot of what's produced in other parts of the world will make its way up through the wind or the ocean currents into the Arctic environment, where it will get into fish and seals and then ultimately polar bears. So we do see pollution, contaminants and things like that in polar bears, unfortunately. So both climate change and pollution are having an impact on the bears.
Wow. So really what we're doing in other parts of the world impacts all the work you're doing and those polar bears that you're researching. It's pretty wild how interconnected our entire world is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, next question. What technologies are being used by scientists to assess the extent of habitat degradation in the areas where polar bears live?
Mm. So in the past, scientists had to do a lot of these observations just on land, or they would fly in a plane to look at sea ice, for example. But now, fortunately, we have some amazing technology, particularly satellites. And so these satellites orbit around the globe, and they will take daily or even sometimes hourly photographs of the sea ice. And so we can take that data, so look at those photographs that's then transformed into a data format that we can use, and we can use it to assess the conditions. So assess how the sea ice is changing throughout the year and over the course of many years.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's amazing. What a great technology to have. Okay, this one's kind of fun. How long do polar bears sleep?
How long do polar bears sleep? So generally they sleep about 7 to 10 hours a day, but that changes with the season. And also it's very hard to know what they're doing during the winter. So we don't really have an idea of how long they're sleeping while out on the sea ice. But for example, there's a polar bear sleeping just off to my left here, and he's been asleep virtually all day. And so whether or not he's sleeping or just resting, because this time of year they're waiting for the ice to form. And so they're spending a lot of time, sleeping, resting with their head on their paws, waiting for that ice to form so they can get back out on the sea ice and start hunting again.
Ah, that is so incredible that you get to see them sleeping and eating and studying them every day. What an incredible job you have. Okay, next, where is food in abundance for polar bears?
Okay. As I mentioned before, polar bears, they primarily hunt seals out on the sea. Well, they exclusively hunt seals out on the sea ice, more or less. And they really focus their movements and hunting in areas that are kind of shallower, so over the continental shelf, so kind of shallow waters. That's because this is where the productivity is highest. So that's where you find all these little zooplankton and fish and ring seals. So all the marine animals are kind of concentrated in these shallower areas. And that's where polar bears really focus their hunting efforts. And within those areas, they'll focus on, they're called leads, so little cracks that form in the ice where the ring seals like to come up and rest or breathe. They will also go to areas called polynyas, which are areas that remain open water throughout the entire winter. And those are kind of created by little ocean currents or wind. And so again, the seals and other marine life like to hang out in these little polynyas. And then in the springtime, when the seals are having their pups, and then they also molt, so they lose their fur and replace it with another set of fur. They'll like to come out and hang out on the sea ice as well during that time of year. So the bears will focus their attention on those areas where the seals are molting, which again is kind of where these cracks form in the sea ice in the springtime.
Well, so obviously the sea cracks are so vital for, and sea ice is so vitally important to polar bears. If nothing, we've learned that today, right? So this is an interesting question because you said that in the Arctic, there's not a ton of people, but you live, or the work you all do is in Manitoba where there are people, obviously, right? So this question's interesting. Are polar bears safe to be around?
Yeah, that's a good question. Polar Bears International is actually doing a lot of really great work to help that coexistence. So to have people and bears live in the same areas, which happens frequently here in Churchill, Manitoba. And so generally they are safe to live around because of the efforts like Polar Bears International and other folks that put a lot of work into keeping people and bears safe when we're living around the bears. And that often means being very alert, keeping an eye out for where the bears are and knowing when they're going to be in certain areas and informing people of when the bears are around, and also sometimes having to move the bears out of town as well. But generally, yes, they are safe to be around. It just takes effort on the behalf of people to make sure they're being safe.
Wow, I think that's really important education that you all provide. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. This one's kind of fun. Are polar bears smart?
Polar bears are very, very smart, yes, and very curious. So it's very interesting. As I mentioned, we're out on the tundra right now, and they will often, you'll see them exploring on the mud flats or on the beach ridges, and they will go and investigate different things. Like they'll see a rock or some vegetation, and they'll go and investigate it to see if there might be food there or something. But they're very intelligent animals, and as I said, very curious.
Okay, I have one last question. You've told us what polar bears tend to eat, but there's one thing you didn't mention. And of course, since I work at Discovery, and this was a question actually submitted by a viewer, and it is, do polar bears eat sharks?
Do they eat sharks? Certainly not regularly. They don't eat sharks, but there is a species of shark in the Arctic called the Greenland shark, and occasionally they would wash up on shore, I would imagine. And if a polar bear came across a washed up Greenland shark, I'm sure they would partake.
That's incredible. Okay, so that completes our questions for today. We are unfortunately at time, but it was an absolute blast to have you join us. Thank you so much, Tyler, for your expertise and all of your knowledge. And we wish you the best of luck as you get your PhD and continue studying. So thank you so much for all the incredible work you do. And we're so glad you had the opportunity to join us today.
Thank you very much.
Our friends, no, thank you. And friends from Craven County, your questions are really incredible. Thank you for being curious like a polar bear. Tyler said that polar bears are curious. You all gave great curiosity questions and shared those with us today. And we're so glad you had the opportunity to join us as well. So thank you for students and teachers and is joining country in the world today. Teachers, if you're interested in learning more about Career Connect, we ask you to join careerconnect.discoveryeducation.com to join the waitlist and have your very own class connect with professionals from leading organizations. We just thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful spotlight event and actually series, because we had three featuring three incredible professionals, including Tyler from our friends at Polar Bear International that are doing just such incredible work for not only our world, but polar bears as well. Thank you for joining us, friends from Polar Bears International, classrooms from across the country, and we hope that you continue to join us and as we continue to have these spotlight events. Please keep in mind that our friends at Polar Bears International, they do have Tundra Connection events as well. So if you visit their website as well, you can see work that they're doing. So thank you again for watching and joining us, and we'll see you during our next Career Connect Spotlight event. Have a great day, everyone. Stay curious.